Hello, everybody. Whoa. Hey, hello. That's pretty bad. How's everybody? Got snow yesterday, and we like it. Okay, so we're gonna pick up with Bhagavatam. Look at that. Okay, we are on this story, which is the Earth's Master story of Prithu. What we covered last week, in order to get to this story, those couple of things. In order to get to that story, we had to Maitreya had to tell the family, connect the previous story to this story, right? So he connected Dhruva to Prithu, to the Prachetas. He's trying to connect them to the Prachetas, but by the time he gets to talking about Vena and Prithu, he mentions that that's an avatar for Vishnu. And Vidura says, okay, then stop and tell me all about that. So we last week we heard about how Vena was born. Prithu's father, so-called father, um, there's his family tree from Dhruva. And we heard that it was this Anga, he married Sunita, who couldn't have a child, so he was doing all these remedies and ceremonies and sacrifices to get her to have a child, but it wasn't working. Finally, they found a workaround by doing worship for Vishnu, and then she got this kind of medicine elixir thing to become fertile. She had a child, but it wasn't a great child. It was Vena. We talked about the implications of that, about karma and remedies. That was last week's stream. If that sounds interesting and you haven't seen it, then you can go see it. Now, we're up to today where Vena gets born. So, Vena is a terrible person, a very like wicked person, macho, hard person, and his father gives up and leaves the kingdom. Then everybody is left without a king. So then this is what happens. Now we're on the new material. Chapter 14, which is the curse on Vena. Scholars like Brigu, who oversee the welfare of the world, saw humanity becoming more and more like animals without a ruler to govern them. So this is what happens. When there's not a ruler, things become unruly. Scholars like Brigu, who oversaw the welfare of the world, saw humanity becoming more and more like animals without a ruler to govern them. So rather than leave the earth without a king, they called upon his heroic mother Sunita to coronate Anga's son Vena, even though he was not really qualified for it. So they made a decision. Sometimes you have to make these decisions where, I mean, I think if you're a Saturn type of ruled person, you kind of make these decisions more often than other people, perhaps unnecessarily. But often you find you have to make a decision between two things which are undesirable. And your guiding point is basically the lesser of the undesirables, is the one that you pick. So that's what's going on right now with these sages. They don't really have a desirable choice. One thing they could do is leave the kingdom as it is, means no king. But they can see that without a king, people can't rule themselves. This is why anarchy doesn't work. And it takes the scholars a bit to realize this, because anarchy works for them. Actually, in the Vedic culture, it has different types of political systems simultaneously operating for different types of people. So for Brahmanas or people who are smart and intelligent, they don't require anybody to rule them. They manage themselves. So they live in a type of anarchy, but not the chaotic type of anarchy. They live in a political system where nobody governs them. Then there's the kings. They live in a feudal system. They work in a feudal system. And then there's the Vaishyas that work in a capitalistic feudalism under the kings. And then there's the Shudras who work in the Vaishyas are the business people. And then there's the Shudras, which are the employees. They work in a communistic feudalism. So that's what Vedic culture is like. So the scholars are used to anarchy. They're used to not needing anybody to tell them what to do, because they do everything right by themselves. So it takes them a moment or two to realize, like, the rest of the people, they really do need a ruler to tell them what's right and wrong and what to do and what not to do. Otherwise, they start to attack each other. So they had to make this choice between the lesser of two evils. So they decided that it would be better to have a king who's not great than to have no king at all. This is often the way we make up our minds about a lot of things. A lot of people get married on this basis. Buy a home or whatever. So that's the decision they made. Rather than leave the earth without a king, they called upon his heroic mother Sunita to coronate Anga's son Vena, even though he was not really qualified for it. Sure enough, the criminals vanished like rats, terrified of snakes, as soon as they heard that the very fierce Punisher Vena had ascended to the throne. So since he's such a macho, hard dude, he really was effective in curbing lawlessness. So they were successful in that respect. However, the wealth and power he gained by his royal ascension inflated Vena's pride. Considering himself the strongest and most glorious, he disrespected everyone, even the most exalted. Just need to check my video here. I'm going to just move. If I move this way, it's wrong. Okay. Considering himself the strongest and most glorious, he disrespected everyone, even the most exalted. Blinded by intoxicating pride, he roamed in a chariot like an unbridled elephant, making heaven and earth tremble, which is powerful and great for getting rid of criminals, but it's not so great to all of a sudden kind of become the big, gigantic, macho tyrant. So here they have a situation where they've flip-flopped from anarchy to tyranny. At the other end of the spectrum, which also doesn't work. His entourage beat drums everywhere as he prohibited religion by declaring worshipping anyone but me is banned. Charity to anyone but the state is forbidden. The priest can never again offer sacrifices. So he set up like a Russian, Soviet communist, atheistic communism, where he's basically saying, no gods, please, no nothing. It's just me. I'm the king. Everybody worship me. And when the scholars see this, they get a little bit upset. Watching all the misadventures and wrongdoings of Vena, the compassionate scholars who had been banned from their sacred duties considered how to save the people from disaster. And this is what they thought. Like a log burning from both ends, people face disaster from both sides. The king harasses them, but if they have no king, criminals will harass them. Fearing what would happen to a kingless kingdom, we overlooked his disqualifications and enthroned him. But now we fear what will happen to the kingdom because of the leader. Alas, what can we do for the welfare of the people? So this is I just realized this now, really. This is not just a illustration of anarchy. It's also an illustration of tyranny. Neither anarchy nor tyranny works, and this is why you can't have a human assume the position of being all powerful, because they're not. So they continue to discuss amongst themselves. A snake-fed milk is dangerous to the person who feeds it. So we shouldn't, it's nice to feed animals. We shouldn't feed the snake, because that makes the snake strong and it makes the venom powerful. And then that's dangerous for you if you're feeding the snake. That's the little wisdom there. It's a common saying in India. A snake-fed milk is dangerous to the person who feeds it. Vena is like a snake, inheriting evil traits from his maternal lineage. So we know about how did he wind up like this? Anga's whole lineage is from Dhruva. Where did these traits come from? Because Anga married someone questionable, who's from the lineage descending from Adharma. So they said, look, I guess he really is wicked, which is inherited from his maternal lineage. Biting the hands that feeds, he punishes and harasses the people who have appointed him king. It's actually the people who give the king power. And the king has to be mindful of that and take care of the people. But if the king harasses the people, then what he's doing is undermining his own power. Because the people are the source of the king's power. So they say, biting the hand that feeds, he punishes and harasses the people who have appointed him king, and the citizens he was appointed to protect. Since we appointed him, we share the blame for what he does. We must therefore find some way to calm him down. We made a great mistake by appointing him king when we knew what sort of wicked person he was. If he will not calm down and heed our advice, we will burn him with our powers. The people have already burned him with their condemnation. So the scholars then concealed their anger and approached Vena, placating him with gentle words. Great and beloved king, they said, we would like to reveal something to you. If you accept it and understand it, your health, wealth, power, and fame will greatly enhance. Speak, said the king. Religion is a most important thing, the scholars explained. It bestows immortality to those who are detached from externalities, but it also has a very practical, worldly function. Religious citizens do not cause a king problems with their intellect, body, desires, or words. O hero, you should not outlaw religion, for it calms and governs the people. A king who abolishes religion easily falls from majesty. A king deserves to accept. So this is a very interesting practical point. They said to him, look, religion is great because it's religious, spiritual, and everything. But you know what? It's a real practical reason why religion is good for the king. Because religion controls people. Religion governs people. And that's what you want to do. You want to govern and control people. So why would you give up on religion? Why would you outlaw religion? It's your tool. So they're giving him very practical advice. Then they say, a king does... Now they're going to, I think, maybe make a mistake and not leave it at that. They probably should have just left it at that. But they continue. They're a little too truthful, which is often the problem with Brahmanas. A king deserves to accept taxes and tribute and thus enjoy great wealth because he protects the kingdom from the likes of thieves and manipulative guides. A king also deserves to enjoy in his next life because he helps the citizens of his kingdom to worship the all-attractive personification of sacrifice by carrying out their four social and religious roles. So they thought, we'll tell him it's not just good for him in this life, it's also good for him in his next life. But that was a mistake because first of all, he doesn't want to hear about himself dying. And second of all, he doesn't want to hear about some person controlling the laws of karma that are going to determine his next life when he's assuming himself to be the supreme powerful person. So with the mention of the all-attractive personification of sacrifice, the king's smile faded and his eye began to twitch. Most blessed Lord, the scholars continued, everyone affectionately pays tribute to the all-attractive, including all kings and even all the gods, up to and including the masters of the universe. For he is the all-attractive maintainer of existence, the soul of all, and he's completely satisfied by anyone who follows his orders. So they're trying to talk sense to him by saying it doesn't make you weak to defer to the supreme being. Everybody does, even the gods do. But they're barking up the wrong tree. When he's satisfied with someone, nothing is impossible for them to achieve. He is the one who grants entry into the God's paradise. He is the essence of knowledge. He is the essence of wealth. He is the essence of discipline. Therefore, it would be best for everyone if you would enjoin your people to worship him according to their various desires and conceptions. If the priests in your kingdom worship the demigods, who are expansions of Hari, the gods will feel properly respected and will be very pleased to give you everything you desire. It would be best for you not to disrespect them. Vena's face had gone sour, despite his efforts to appear calm. He could not grasp the good and gentle advice because wickedness derailed and subverted his intellect. Anything auspicious about him was thus destroyed. So any last opportunity of him actually working out as a king was destroyed at this point when he neglected this advice explicitly. Thinking himself a wise man, he insulted the scholars and trampled their respectful requests by disdainfully scoffing. Ha! You are so childish. You mistake immorality for morality. You want people to ignore their true husband and have an affair by worshipping some other protector. Any jackass who does not acknowledge the king as their supreme master will not receive anything auspicious in this life or after death. Who is this all-attractive personification of sacrifice you love so much? You are like sluts who adore some lover more than their own husband. Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, Indra, Vayu, Yama, Ravi the sun, Parjanya the rain-giver, Dhanada the lord of wealth, Soma the moon, Kshiti the earth, Agni the fire, and Varuna the lord of the waters, all of them, and all the other wise gods, entrust the king with their powers to bless or curse. Thus the king is known as the essence of all the gods. Therefore, scholars, the priests should dedicate their ceremonies to me without envy. They should bring their offerings to me. Who but me should be the first to enjoy all things? The scholars left in disgust. Killed, they concluded. He must be killed. His very nature is so thoroughly wicked that if he lives, the kingdom will soon be reduced to ash. This useless creature does not deserve to occupy the throne and play the role of a god among men. He shamelessly insults Vishnu, the husband of all, and the personification of all sacrifice. Who, except a wretch like Vena, could be critical of Vishnu, by whose mercy alone Vena is given his share of power and glory? The sages thus manifested their anger and decided to kill Vena. His insults to the infallible had already killed him. The sages merely made it tangible by invoking a deadly sound. These important, a couple of important points to people who are interested in the way magic works. Like I said yesterday about last week about God's blessings, they're really just loans from a bank. Similarly, curses and magic are really not that amazing. The reason why they were able to assassinate him with a magic spell is because he deserved to be killed. Because by fate he needed to be killed, they were able to act as instruments of fate. But if you try to do something to somebody that they actually don't deserve, you won't be able to do it, not by magic or by any other means. Vena suddenly fell lifeless, and the sages gave her son's corpse to his weeping mother. How do you spell this? She embalmed the corpse. There you go. With a special technology. The sages returned to their own ashrams. Sometime later, those sages began to discuss things, sitting on the bank of Saraswati River after having performed their daily rituals and baths. They had noticed that social problems were on the rise again. Maybe by killing the king, we've left the leaderless people as prey for dangerous criminals. Clouds of dust billowed here and there, raised by bands of thieves, galloping everywhere as they plundered the people. I might want to translate this as part of their thoughts, because what's going on is they're finally realizing, like, oh, what we thought was these dust storms is actually bands of thieves. We shall protect the citizens ourselves, the sages concluded. But when they moved to destroy the criminals, just as they had destroyed the king, they realized that the citizens themselves had become the criminals and were plundering each other. So they were quite shocked to realize that when you leave people without a king, it's not just that they get attacked by thieves, they become thieves. And they start to attack each other. So now, who are they going to punish? And who are they going to protect from who? The whole populace had become thieves in the absence of a king's governance. If they killed the criminals, there would be almost no one left. They realized that they had to intervene fully to fix this dire situation. Wise philosophers see everything as equal, and therefore remain neutral and uninvolved in ordinary affairs. But if this neutrality causes them to ignore the needy, their spirituality is lost like water leaking from a cracked pot. So here what's going on is they say, well, we're not supposed to get involved in the affairs of government in any except in an advisory capacity, because that's part of our dharma as intellectuals who are we're not subject. We live in anarchy. We shouldn't take advantage of that and get involved in ruling people. But we have to make an exception to that now, even though we are actually not affected by what's going on in the world. We should have affection for the world and therefore take action. If you don't, then what's the meaning of our so-called spirituality? So I'll just read that statement one more time. Wise philosophers see everything as equal and therefore remain neutral and uninvolved in ordinary affairs. But if this neutrality causes them to ignore the needy, then their spirituality is lost like water leaking from a cracked pot. The flawlessly heroic philosopher kings of Anga's dynasty are devoted to all attractive Keshava, and they should not be allowed to disappear. To restore Anga's dynasty, the sages utilized Vena's preserved corpse. Rapidly catalyzing material from its thigh, they created a very small human. His body was black as a crow, with short arms and legs, big jaws, blunt nose, red eyes, and copper-red hair. He humbly bowed to the sages, asking, "What would you have me do?" So what they did is they're doing some kind of cloning here. They want to clone Vena so that they can get another royal personality. But Vena has a lot of bad traits from his mother's side. So what they do is first they take some kind of genetic material from his thighs, and they clone that, and then they get this kind of pygmy dwarf. It kind of sounds like a dwarf, like a classic high fantasy dwarf. And he bows and he says, "What would you have me do?" And then they say Nishida, which means you should sit and wait. Just be patient. It means be patient, because he's going to become. I think my inference is this type of human will proliferate in Kali Yuga. So they say to wait. You'll have your time on stage later. I think that's my inference. Anyway, they tell him to wait, and then later, because of being the person who is told to wait, he becomes known as waiter, which is kind of funny because it's like a waiter in a restaurant. Later, this person became known as Nishad, and his descendants formed the forest-dwelling nomadic mountain tribes known as Nishad. Creating Nishad. Now, what was the point of creating Nishad? That was to absorb all the ghastly calamities of Vena's corpse. So, in other words, he had bad traits from his mother's side, so they got rid of those out of their recipe for cloning by creating this person, and then The learned sages then catalyzed the material in the arms of the lifeless king and created a couple. They were very satisfied because they knew that this couple was an expansion of the all-attractive. He is an expansion of all-attractive Vishnu, the sustainer of the world, they said, and she is the power of Lakshmi, who is inseparable from that supreme person. We name him Prithu, expansive, because his fame as the greatest emperor will expand far and wide amongst kings. And we name her Archie, splendid, because her smile is radiant, and her goddess-like qualities outshine the beauty of the most beautiful ornaments. She will be like the sunrise, and he will be like the earth. He is directly a fragment of Hari, born to protect the world, and she is certainly his dedicated power, Shri, taking birth because she is inseparable from him. While the learned scholars thus praised them, the greatest Gandharvas sang, the Siddhas released a shower of flowers, and the women of paradise danced. As conches and trumpets blew, and mridangas and drums resounded in the sky, hosts of divine sages and ancestrals came forth. The guru of everyone, Brahma, arrived with the gods and their masters. He took the right hand of the man Prithu and saw that the lines resembled a mace. This is interesting. So he's doing a reading of Prithu by checking his palmistry and his physiognomy. So Brahma arrives and he looks at Prithu's right hand and he sees a configuration called the mace. Then he looks at the left hand. Wait, where's the left hand? Oh yeah, he looks at the left hand last. He starts at the right and he goes clockwise. He looks at the right hand and he sees a mace. Then he looks at the feet and he finds that the lines form lotus flowers. On the left hand, he found the lines forming a discus, the Sudarshan. So Sudarshan and mace on the hands, and then the lotus is on the feet, indicates the avatar of Vishnu. Thus, Brahma, the supreme authority, confidently concluded that Prithu was a fragment of Hari's expansion. Any questions so far? I have another chapter ready to go. Let me check. Somebody told me that the humans get small and the bugs get huge in Kali Yuga. I'm not sure about the bugs part. Yes. Okay, so people just seem to be listening. Now let's go to the next chapter. Prithu's coronation. It's chapter 15. So we swung from anarchy to tyranny, and now we're going to come to a solution, which is a good leader who leads on the behalf. He leads for the benefit of the people. That's the system that works. Which, of course, is very impractical when you don't have any good people. The priests and spiritualists prepared Prithu's coronation by gathering everything necessary from people in the surrounding countries. Everyone offered riches for the ceremony, including the deer, birds, cows, and divine serpents, even the earth, sky, seas, rivers, and mountains. At the ceremony, Prithu was exquisitely dressed and wore the finest ornaments. His wife, Archie the Splendid, indeed appeared like a new form of fire in her brilliant jewelry. The gods themselves presented gifts to bless the emperor. The god of wealth, Kuvera, gave him a great throne made of gold. The god of waters, Varuna, gave him an umbrella that shone like the moon and emitted a cooling mist. The god of wind, Vayu, gave him fans. The god of morality, Dharma, gave him a necklace of fame. Indra, the king of paradise, gave him an exquisite crown. Yama, the god of punishment, gave him the enforcer's scepter. Brahma, the original speaker, gave him armor made of words. Bharti, goddess of learning, decorated him with perfect pearls. Hari gave him the beautiful Sudarshan discus, and his wife, the goddess of fortune, gave him inexhaustible opulence. Rudra, god of destruction, gave him a 10-mooned blade, and his wife Ambika gave a 100-mooned sheath. Soma, god of immortal nectar, gave him ageless horses, and Twashta, the divine architect, gave him a chariot that embodied beauty. Agni, the god of fire, gave him a bow made from the horns of cows and goats. And Surya, the god of the sun, gave him arrows made of light. Bu, the goddess of earth, gave him magical shoes. The heavens themselves constantly offered flowers. The Kechara, the gods in the sky, would teach him the arts of dance, singing, musicianship, and the art of invisibility, and the sages blessed him to be truthful. The ocean offered a conch from her womb. The seas, mountains, and rivers created royal roads. Then narrators, bards, and singers came forward. Knowing that they wanted to glorify him, Prithus smiled and spoke to them with a voice as grave as thunder. Ho, narrators! Hey, bards and gentle singers! I have not yet manifested my qualities, so why should you already make me the object of praise? Do not praise me yet, or your words would be baseless. If in the future I do things worthy of your beautiful song, glorify me then. In any case, the truly cultured prefer to sing of the supreme subject of poetry, rather than singing about abominable things. Even if, as Brahma said, I am an expansion of the supreme, I still should not encourage you to praise me. A person who really has good qualities would never encourage admirers to glorify him, for that would destroy his good qualities. Because it's not a good quality to be vain. And a person who doesn't really have good qualities just makes a fool of himself by accepting praise. That's why people who are truly powerful and famous hate to hear their own praise. Those who are truly exalted are very modest and feel that even their greatest accomplishments are flawed and embarrassing. My dear narrators and singers, I'm very sorry. I have not yet shown any greatness in this world, so how can I be so childish as to ask you to describe my deeds? However, in the next chapter, they're going to sing about it anyway, because Brahma's going to order them to. Brahma's going to override the king. And then that, in effect, is a summary. The next chapter, by the song that they sing, is in effect a summary of his whole life. But then, in the next chapter, Vidura says, I want more than a summary. So Maitreya gives him details, and that's the remaining part of the tale of Prithu. So that's what I have for you today. Any questions? Thank you, Bardo. I won the Squid Games again. Bardo gave me 20,000 won. Here, let's see. We got a question from Kermit. Does parents' devotion towards the deity affect their progeny in some manner? Yes, but you will not see it in practice today because things are so messed up. And there's, look, like if you put a magnet next to a microphone, will it affect the signal? It will affect the signal. But if you have a hurricane blowing on the microphone at the same time, will you notice it? No. That's the point. So little things like that will affect the child. A lot of things will affect the child, and therefore you can engineer the type of child that you have by the type of person that you are. However, there's such a mess of things going on constantly in Kali Yuga, or in the modern era, which makes those things relatively unnoticeable. Things that are way more powerful than that. Any other questions about this? Steppenwolf, for this question, please watch my video. Is Astrology Beautiful? I have a video series. In the second or third episode, I explain that with a lot of illustrations and animations. Yeah, beating Galibji says, how does this? Tansimo. Tasnimo. Tasnimo, Galib says, wow, we have people just beat their own drums so much these days. That's the thing. It's like embarrassing. if you're really great, and other people will say it. like, like somebody will get on a microphone on the stage and say, like, oh, yo, I'm the best. Not realizing how unmanly that is to actually do that, or even unfeminine to do that. It's great to say that you're great, because if you're really great, you wouldn't need to say it. So if you are saying that you're great, obviously you're overcompensating for something. So it's very strange. All right. So this was a rather simple section. Jonathan wants to know if there's any other time in the Vedas that the rishis have done this, creating artificial people, or in other words, making clones. Probably, but this is the only one that I'm aware of. I don't know of any other situations like that currently, or at least they're not coming to mind. Of course, I mean, you were overlooking the obvious things, but how would Brahma have any children at all, if not for cloning? Because Brahma doesn't have a partner. So he actually has to clone himself to make Sanat Kumar's, to make Rudra is a clone from his anger. Yeah, is an avatar of Shiva, of course, but the incarnation comes through the cloning of his anger. Narada, all those rishis are clones from Brahma. So I think that is obvious that this is actually kind of ubiquitous. Kermit wants to know if a new path is required to fix Kali Yuga. No, Kali Yuga is just like the winter; it just happens. You just wait for it to subside. Just because of the trajectory of the Earth around the sun that you get the winter, you can't adjust the Earth's trajectory. So the same thing. It's just the trajectory of human karma that you go through the Kali Yuga. Okay, people. See you next week for more Paladipika. Thank you for joining me.